veterinary friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you. His name is Dr. Caleb Frankel, and he is the founder and CEO of Instinct.vet, and he is also an emergency medicine veterinarian currently working. Right, Caleb?
Yep, still in practice, still crazy.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to the podcast to speak with me. And is it okay if I call you Caleb?
Oh yeah, please.
Okay.
And thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. So do you want to just start by telling me a little bit about your veterinary journey, how it all started for you? I love to hear those stories.
Yeah, of course. So I graduated from Penn's vet school about 15 years ago, which is kind of crazy to say now. But
fast, doesn't it?
It does. The gray hair is real, and mostly for my kids. But the veterinary journey for me is probably pretty classic. I'm definitely one of those people who, by the time I was newly in high school, I sort of knew what track I wanted to go down, and basically it started for me in central Pennsylvania, where I'm from, actually. I was doing an honors program in high school where you were able to be placed in career exploration in the afternoons. I think I was 16 years old, and I love science and I loved animals, and I had nobody medical in my real life. Actually, most of my family was business, and I said, well, combining those two things, maybe I'll check out being a veterinarian. So I had a bunch of these sort of experiences lined up, and the first one was with a veterinarian who worked on Amish farms, large animal in the morning and small animal in his day practice in the afternoon, and very James Harriet type medicine. And I did my first, experience in high school. I arrived at like 2 p.m., I want to say, and we're finishing up the Amish farm calls, and ended up, you're supposed to leave by like 5 or whatever at the latest. I ended up being there till 10:30 at night. I couldn't get enough. I mean, he just saw appointments, had emergencies, and that was it for me. Actually, I canceled every other experience and just did more and more veterinary experiences. And I never looked back. I was one of those people who never changed my major. From then on, I had a focus. And when I have a focus, I can usually just figure out ways to execute it. And that's how it all started and led to, going to undergraduate. I went to the University of Maryland, did animal sciences, and then went to Penn right after that for veterinary school. And that's how I got here.
That's fascinating. So when you said you worked till 10:30 and you were loving every minute of it, that always piques my interest, because so many people now are so focused on not, spending all their time at vet med and getting out of work on time and all of that. So did that change for you over the years? Like, did you get to the point where you're like, I'm not going to spend all my time working, or do you still have that kind of passion for it?
Fascinating question. I look back on that and think about how toxic it probably was, right?
But it didn't feel like it in the moment, right?
It didn't. It was a little bit of a different time in a different world and a different environment. I mean, first of all, you have to understand his practice where we were was rural. And that means if he's closed, there's nothing, right, for the animals.
Yeah, there's no help, right?
Yeah. And so, I was there that night late because there were 2 emergencies that we were dealing with. And I was just fascinated by it. And he was a general practice, not an emergency, but this is at a time where there were no emergency centers, literally. He would wake up in the middle of the night and get called in because he was all there was, right? And so, just with that context, there was that. But then to answer your question, as I got out into my veterinary career, 10 years later, I guess, from that experience, I was in a little bit of a different world. I did an internship right out of veterinary school at a small animal private practice. And, it was a mega 50 doctor kind of referral center. And I noticed something. And by the way, in between, I didn't spend much time in veterinary hospitals, as weird as that sounds. I was not the person who was the kennel assistant or the veterinary technician background. I mean, I really had nothing.
You just
um,
started right as a vet.
I started right as a vet, and man, would I not recommend it. I mean, the people who did nursing, I have great respect for because they really understood it. I had more of a ramp, right, to figure out the hospital, but I also had a really fresh perspective that challenged the status quo, which I thought was, that's my MO for sure. But when I got out, I noticed right away, because in school you don't notice this stuff. Everybody's working forever, and that's normal and
Right.
expected, and I don't
Yeah,
think
in
that should
school.
change. Yeah, but then you get out, and I noticed that non-interns were there till 10 o'clock at night, writing records, dealing with their clients, whatever it was, helping with patients. And I noticed that it just wouldn't be sustainable for people to do that for their career. And I actually, that started my software journey, really picking up on this. And that sounds um, pretty standard these days, but remember, this was in 2008, before burnout was really being talked about in veterinary medicine. People were just recognizing that we had like a problem with things like, serious things like suicide and divorce, and ranking really highly in, stress and anxiety and burnout in our profession. And this was back when it really wasn't talked about, but I could see it coming. And that was part of, how I got so obsessed with software and technology in the ground floor.
So when you went through school and you liked this kind of James Harriet career, when you got out of school, you did the internship, then did you go to mixed practice or did you go to small animal or what'd you do?
Yeah, great question. I went to undergrad at a place. I sought out animal sciences, which is very large animal focused, as a undergraduate major, purposely because I thought maybe I would want to do some mixed animal. But what's interesting, I came from a small animal background, even though I was in a, rural, semi-rural upbringing. But I didn't have any large animal experience at all. And so being on farms was fascinating for me, especially the Amish farms. But I was a fish out of water for sure. I knew nothing about husbandry. I mean, I had to read about just like why they were doing anything. It was just the basics for me.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to do undergrad in animal sciences because I wanted to fill those holes to see if I did want to do mixed animal. And then I got out. Even at Penn, I was doing the mixed animal track. Back then you tracked, and I chose both. But it became clear by my last year of vet school that I started liking either internal medicine or emergency medicine. And as it turns out, if you want to be good at one of those things, it really does help to pick your species. And especially for somebody like me, it was the husbandry part of large animal was going to be a real lift for me to get really good at. And I like doing things I'm good at. And so, not focusing on that and adding that layer of trying to put that together with your clinical learning just felt like a fool's errand for me. So I quickly sort of diverted that track. But I love to this day bovine medicine still.
Do you? Yeah, I think it's fascinating that you say that because when I went to Michigan State, and when I was there, I remember distinctly being in my large animal rotation, and we had his name was Dr. Baker, but he was like the god of bovine medicine at that time. And I was terrified because I was a city kid, like I had done some horse work and
Yeah.
small animal, but I had no idea about cows. And I remember him calling me into the office one time and I thought I was going to get in trouble. And he said, why are you so terrified of me? And I said, because I don't know anything about cows. I'm like,
Yeah.
I know nothing. I know they're cute and that's about it. So he was like, well, that's how I started. He said, I was a city kid too. And he said, I had to learn. So he said, you're fine, just
Yep.
relax. And so after that, it was kind of a big relief that he was going to teach me what I needed to know. And I wasn't going to end up being a cow vet anyway, most likely. So, but that was fascinating because I think a lot of vet students, and if any of them are listening, freak out when they're doing something that they're not used to doing.
Yeah, and it's the same for the large animal students when they come to small. I mean, I remember
Yes.
just bringing them under my wing. They were terrified of working with dogs, some of them, which is like pretty hilarious to me, because they would stand up to these, thoroughbred race horses, which that was the part that was terrifying for me. I was just like,
Right.
what am I doing in this stall? I
With this
remember
wild horse.
Oh yeah, I remember one experience. At Penn, the large animal and small animal are separate. So they're, because the Penn small animal hospital is in the city. Obviously, the large animal is about an hour outside. So when you're outside, you live at the dorms. It's a whole different experience, a whole
Life.
different terrifying experience for for a city kid. But I loved it. But I remember one experience where, in vet school, you barely get any, personal time. And my then girlfriend, now wife, came out to New Bolton, and I happened to have a single dorm room. So she stayed with me, and I got to show her what we did out there. And she woke up with me, I remember, at like 3:30, 3:45, because you have to have your treatments done before rounds, right? And I had so many horses to take care of, I remember that morning. And she was my assistant. And I wasn't sure if we would make it in our relationship after that morning, because she followed me around, and there were times where I almost died with the horses. I mean, but it's like the normal vet school, like almost dying, like
Yes.
you're by yourself, not really trained for it, having to give injections and meds and be careful about it. And, you've been trained, but not to the degree you'd hope. And,
Not that you've been
you're
around
the
horses
nurse.
all your life, like you don't know their
No.
behavior. And yeah, I remember
Yeah, and
that.
you're being really careful, and you're saying things to my girlfriend then that was like, "Hey, if I, bolt out, I need you to hold this gate so you shut it as fast as possible." It's like, to most vet students, that's normal. You're like, "Oh yeah, I remember those times." But like, to my, my now wife, she tells those stories to this day of
Normal
that morning.
people.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck are any of you doing there?
Yeah, it is. It's a crazy, crazy profession, but those of us that are in it, for whatever reason, just thrive on that kind of unpredictability, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I know a lot of people who say to vet students, and this actually bothers me a little bit, or to people who are thinking about entering this career, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't. I feel that makes me so cringy.
Me
Um,
too.
I feel so lucky that I've been through those experiences. I wouldn't trade them for the world. Veterinarians are very different people because of what we've been through and what we do for animals. By the way, it's not for like Wall Street or whatever it is, right?
We're not making
It's
piles of money.
no, it's a really special thing to have done and be a part of, and it shapes you as a human. So I have, as you can tell in my voice, I have a lot of respect for the veterinarian and the
Yeah.
veterinary nurse, and that shapes what we do at Instinct.
Yeah. I really, really love that you say that, because that's why I'm doing this. I want people to love it because yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's hard. Like it's all those things. But I think that's why it's beautiful, because it's all those things, and we have the best stories.
We do. And what's the alternative? You're in an office. I mean, it's a
Sitting at a
cubicle.
computer all day. When I
Yeah,
do
like I do
this,
now.
yeah, about 2 or 3 hours of this, and I'm like, I got to go do something because this is hard. So tell me how you ended up, because now you're a software guy, right? So
Yeah.
tell me how you got from being an ER doc in down this road. Like you wanted to change something, obviously. That's how most entrepreneurs show up, right?
Yeah, this was not the
I got
plan.
it.
I'll tell you that much. I'm a planner, so this is kind of weird for me because I'm the kid who was 16 years old and knew I was going to vet school. Didn't even know what it would take or what that meant. I probably at that point didn't even know how many years vet school
You
was
were
or
just
how it
gonna
worked.
do it.
I
Hmm.
was like, well, I'm going to be a vet. That's a given. And then you figure it out, right? And I'm the kid who didn't take a break, like, high school to undergrad, same major from day one to vet school. And now I'm, running a software company, which makes no sense, but it sort of does if look at things. I've always been a hobby technologist, first of all. So I've always loved technology because I think it is a really interesting way to enrich your life if you're good at it. And I saw back in the early, first day I had a computer, which was probably, honestly, it was probably around the same time as I discovered veterinary medicine. I got my first computer, right? And that's crazy for people to hear, but remember, this was like the 90s, right? So in I want to say 1995, I got my first computer, and it felt like that day I spent in the veterinary clinic. It felt magical, and there was a lot of possibility to it. And from that day forward, I was always tinkering with technology, and I'm not like a gamer with technology. It was more like productivity and how it could improve lives through the things that people do in their daily work, right? And so that took me to my education, where I used technology a lot, even in the early days, to try to figure out ways to be better at whatever I was doing. And then I got to vet school, and I was the dork with are you ready for this? Like a Palm Pilot. We didn't have these, we didn't have the phones, but we had Palm Pilots when I was in vet school, and I had one, and I was trying to use it for anything I could. I was like, my clinicians were like, what is wrong with this guy? I'm sure. And of course, we were all on paper records then. And then I got out into my internship, and I remember this is when it started. I was in a really progressive small animal practice called Coral Springs Animal Hospital. It definitely shaped my career. And at that time, Coral Springs it was one of the legacy first specialty kind of centers out there that wasn't a university. It had been around since the 70s. The owner, a man named Lloyd Mizels, was a really progressive thinker in operations and ran a really cool internship program. He's since retired, but he definitely shaped my career because they had won Practice of the Year, award several times. They were trying to use anything they could to make their teams better. They would spare no expense. They would try things. And I got out, and I remember just looking at the state of things, I was blindsided by the state of technology and software. And remember, I spent no time in vet clinics, so I didn't know what it was like, right? But I did have this one really weird experience in my background during summers of undergrad and summers of vet school. It was really summers between, but I worked at a company called Booz Allen Hamilton, and it's a global consulting firm that many veterinarians have probably never heard of, but most business people know. And I worked there because my best friend's aunt was a partner there, and they were working on some projects that needed animal health domain expertise, and they ran an internship program for college students, and I was on teams as the animal health expert. And what I saw was really cool, which was how other industries were using technology around the time. And then that informed the days I got out into private practice, right? They were trying to use everything, and I was blindsided by the state of, or the lack of, technology or high quality software.
Behind
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, this was 15 years ago. And by the way, fast forwarding to why I started Instinct, I looked back, and it had been about 10 years, and nothing had changed. Like literally not a thing. And I said,
because most of us aren't techies, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I remember when I graduated, I would say like 1 or 2 in 10 would be like me, like, hey, what are we doing here? And everybody else was like, what's wrong with you? Just write the paper record, and now I see in my practice interns and residents who are coming out, and they've got every device, and they're like, oh, you guys made Instinct, that's amazing. That we use that at school, and it's probably 8 in 10 now feel that way, so it's changed a lot, which is really cool to see. But anyway, that is what led me to this. And so back in those days when I was a baby intern, I became not only obsessed with emergency medicine, becoming a great clinician, but I became, like, honestly, not in a healthy way, obsessed with the state of technology. And my mentor there, Dr. Mizels, got me on the IDEX software advisory board to try to make their products better. And I was doing research on everything that was out there. I tinkered and created a blog about, Excel and Google Sheet boards we were using, and then referring vets would come in and say, how'd you like make that? And they would say, oh, Caleb can come out to your clinic and show you. And I trust me, I did a bunch of things that just didn't work, and we never looked back. But that is really what started it back in the early days. And it wouldn't be until another 7 years until I started Instinct. And, there was a path in between where I actually I started a blog, and that led to me being director of new product development at a company called Brief Media, where they make clinicians brief, a wonderful company that most know. But back in 2013, they had secretly partnered with Don Plum, the author of Plums. He's a real person for most people who don't know, and he's a great person. But they had partnered with him to finally make a high quality version of Plums on a digital resource, but they were just creating the ideas for taking the book digital, and they needed a veterinarian to start the team and run the project. And I was brought in initially consulting, and then I was really given a job I wasn't qualified for, director of new product development. And in 2013, myself and a couple others there started this Plums project, and we made we're the early team behind the Plums app, which many use. And I don't have anything to do with that now. The Plums team, runs that, but I was on the initial team that started that, and that's really where I learned how to do this. And it was exciting, and I stayed in the clinic. But yeah,
that's fascinating to me, because just this week, I have a couple new vets that are working at my practice with me. And just this week I forget what drug we were talking about, but I said, do either one of you have that Plums book? Because one of my other doctors had the actual book. And I'm like, you guys have that? And they're like, they both whipped out their phones. They're like, yeah, it's right here. And I'm like, oh, you can tell I'm old because I'm looking for the book, and they've got it like at their fingertips. Yep. And it was fascinating. So we actually had the conversation about Plums, the app. So it's funny that you say that, because we just talked about that this week. So tell me how it went from that to Instinct. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, well, at Plums, I was fortunate because, they were a publishing company for the most part. They had a digital team working on the website, but they've never made point of care software. And I was brought in to help figure it out, really. And so I just figured it out. And myself and a couple people who are now, with me at Instinct, we hired, a team around it, and figured out how to, it was the place where I learned how to work with software life cycles, and manage software engineers, and design high quality software, and commercialize it and support it. I mean, I did everything with the CEO there, and it was a wonderful experience. And it really helped me. So, before that, I had ideas at that point for fixing what I called the software mess one day. I didn't know if I'd ever do it. But that project really, being director of new product development there really taught me that I could do it, and how this could potentially happen. And in 2016, about 3 years into that project, it had become very successful. We realized we were really good at it. I sort of said to the core team there, I have some much bigger ideas, to solve some problems in the veterinary space around software. And I had, a good idea of what it would take to do it. And long story short, in late 2016, we decided to work on this as a nights and weekends project out of my basement here in the Philadelphia area. And as scrappy as it gets, I had 3 jobs then. I had my, working as director of new product development. I was in the clinic 2 days a week. And then I was working on this on nights and weekends. And that continued probably for too long, but it was a really great experience. We built a prototype. We figured out what we wanted to do, and we tested it with a lot of key people I had, become really good friends and contacts with in the industry. And we were showing this to big hospitals, and they were saying, wow, if you built this, we would use it. How long would it take before this is real? And so we raised a little bit of money, and we thought we had enough validation for our prototype. And at the end of 2016, we started building the real thing out of my basement. And we never looked back. In May of 17, we launched our, what I call our market entry product, which was a treatment plan. So it's a digital whiteboard solution that connects to other practice software. And it was built specifically for the large hospitals, emergency centers, specialty centers, teaching hospitals. And that was the first product we built and launched. And to this day, that's running, we have 50,000 people who've used it on 4 continents. It runs over half the teaching hospitals out there. A lot of the big centers like AMC in New York and the Blue Pearl Hospital. So we're really proud of that. And we started the company really off that product.
So that product was before the company, then the company came, and now there's more, right?
Well, yeah, no, that was with the company. So in
Okay.
2016, we, basically incorporated Instinct as a separate entity. That was the product, the company we were working on this Instinct treatment plan under.
Okay.
Of course, Brief Media knew we were working on this as a side thing, and they were very supportive, and they wanted us to stay a part of the Plums project. So many of us kept that job for over a year, actually, while we were doing this, which was crazy. But eventually we did step down, completely, and it had taken on a life of its own. So no, it's always been Instinct since 2016, and we launched in 17, and then in 2019 we had built a really big following for us in these big hospitals, and we started hearing the same thing, which is, hey, this is amazing, but when could it be the whole thing? And we always knew we wanted to solve, the whole problem if it wasn't solved by the time we got there, and it wasn't solved. And we said, we're in a unique position. It'll be a big lift to go there, but we've done a lot of the foundational work. And so we had a couple of the universities approach us and said, look, we're thinking about switching to something, but we don't want to. And we love, they were already using our treatment plan and said, everybody loves it. Is there any chance you're going to build this? Because we would regret going in a different direction. And we said, look, we haven't told anybody this, but one day we would like to. It's probably a couple of years off. We had a small team there, we were bootstrapped, and they said, well, what would it take for us to push you over the edge to start doing it? And so we had that conversation.
A little bit of money, maybe.
Yeah, like an agreement that you would do this. So
You buy it after we did all the work.
yeah, exactly. Become a customer. And so that's actually how we got started. And then, it turns out a lot of our hospitals wanted that. And so in 2020, right before the pandemic, we started working on Instinct EMR in sort of stealth mode, which is our full practice management software.
Medical records, right?
Yeah, it's a full practice management software, despite the name. Yep. And we wanted to call it Instinct EMR to differentiate it a little bit. We really, think it's, the PIMS landscape, as everybody calls it, is, I think it should be the unPIMS. Like it really needs a shakeup, and it needs a shakeup from the veterinary floor up. And that's how we approached it, which is totally a weird way to do this. It's initially focused on specialty ER teaching, urgent care, which is interesting. Nobody's really ever done that and done it well. We have general practices using it, to be clear. It's just we haven't focused on that yet. We will. But it was a huge project during the pandemic. We were working on it. We planned to launch it in 2021, which we did bring it out of beta then, but we had a couple of hospitals in 2020 who came to us and did a demo and said, oh my gosh, I don't want to go in a different direction. Our first one was like, I'm opening my hospital in, I think it was June 2020. We were 6 months maybe into building. And they said, look, we don't want a different software and then switch. This is our future. And we said, okay, well, this thing's really early. They were using Microsoft Word, for example, to augment parts we didn't build yet, which we knew we weren't going to get to yet. And they're customers to this day and love that hospital. So we did have a couple of hospitals like that using it in beta in 2020, which is a really great way to build a product because you get real users. But But then in 2021, I think it was February, we really took it out of beta and have been rolling it out every week since. And it's still maturing. I'm so proud of what it does and how it works and the team around it. It's exciting. It's a huge project, so there's a lot to build, but it is, a full PIMS, to be clear. And we've done it our way, and we're really excited about what we're building for the future.
So tell me what you're trying to do. Like, are you trying to make it just click a button and our records are like automatically written up? Like, what's the goal? Like, what are you trying to do for the like on the ground person that doesn't know tech very well? Like, what is your goal for us, the people that are going to use this software?
Yeah. So I hope you can hear me. There's like an amazing amount of lawn mowing going on right now.
It's fine. I can hear it a little bit, but I think we'll be
sorry. Okay. Yeah,
Things
sorry
happen.
everybody. Yeah, so I didn't plan that. So we named the company Instinct for a reason.
Okay, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, like your software should help you. It should take over things that you don't want to think about, that you do repeatedly, for example. And I once counted in my, I count clicks, and I once counted in my software that it took me 11 clicks to record a phone conversation in the software I'd been using, right? And how many times do we record a phone conversation a day, right?
Too many.
Yeah, and probably not all of them, because I know, oh, that's 11 clicks. Do I really want to record this, right? And so, that's a great example of where very thoughtfully designed, which is again why we called it Instinct, thoughtfully designed from people who live it, people who get it. We have 10 veterinarians on our team. I don't even know any of the major software companies that have that. And we really want to design something from a user experience perspective that has that thoughtful automation in it. And look, there are other companies who've tried this and who do some flavor of it, but we're taking it to another layer. So there's something in human health called decision support. And decision support is a fancy word for, you getting help doing what you're doing in your day job at the moment, at the point of you doing it, right? So at the point of care. And we've done something around decision support, for example, from the early days in our treatment plan, which we still offer, and many people, choose to use that software, are connected to a different practice management solution. And in that program and our full practice management system, we have patient safety warnings, which are a great example of what we do that's very different. So here's an example. You go to prescribe a medication or put it on a treatment sheet because you want your nurses to give a dose of, whatever. And Instinct will step in if you put, because we know the weight and the drug, Instinct will step in if you put a dangerously high dose or low dose, actually an effective dose, and step in and say, hey, before you do this, are you sure? Because Instinct detected that you may not want to, right?
Right. Maybe you should think again. Review your math.
Yep. So we catch thousands of errors at hospitals, which will turn into, patient safety issues, right? Will turn into lawsuits, at minimum client concerns, right? And so that's a great example of something we do that's super unique. And we have a lot of other little things I could tell you about like that add up to making this, I think, a very special tool for the industry going forward.
Yeah, I think if you could minimize the clicks for sure, because when you said that, I was like, yeah, you got to go through like 8 different steps to just enter something in the record, and that gets annoying because you have to do it so many times during the day. And then the safety issue is huge. Absolutely.
It's huge, especially for, there's this, I lecture to students, and there's this ever-changing amount of medical knowledge that veterinarians need to keep up with. And it's the same in human health. And I think, the statistic, I don't have it in front of me that I use, but there was a study in the NIH that the doubling rate of medical knowledge in the 1950s was 50 years. So it would take every 50 years for the medical literature to double, right? And in 2020, they estimated that it was down to 70 days. Just how can you expect an industry, a practitioner to keep up with that kind of medical knowledge. And so these are the things that we are trying to think about, because software should be way more. Of course, it's a trade-off though, right? You can't do everything when you build software like this. So
Right,
that
right.
means,
There's something to
yeah,
it.
that means that we've had to pick where our tools are a little bit more rudimentary at first, and we'll build on those, right? But we've strategically picked, where we want to have the biggest impact for hospitals, who really think differently, that are the modern hospitals for the future.
Right, yeah. So is there something when you started to develop the software, something about what you're discovering that it can do that like surprised you and you were like, oh, I didn't think of this, but look what we're doing and this is super cool for the vets on the ground?
Well, I mean, the early days, I will tell you, we had two missions that we were trying to do with our software. One was help practitioners be more efficient and happy. So, staff efficiency and staff happiness, which turned into like a really important thing. And number two was why we're all here, patient outcomes, right? But we added in a third that, we didn't realize we were doing this, but now it moves the needle. And as it turns out, that's why a lot of, hospital groups buy our software, and that is capture mischarges. So mischarges are really, sort of our third, reason for existence. And for those that don't know what that is, veterinary medicine has this weird problem that nobody really understands outside, but we don't bill our clients, right? Like a human hospital. In a human hospital, you bill your clients and you have a different problem, which is collections, getting them to pay it, right? Most veterinarians don't have the problem, but what we have instead is a mischarges problem. And that means we do all these services, but because we bill at the point of care, we don't ever capture all of them on our invoice. Right.
Yeah.
And what we found is our software completely automates the doing of a thing, because the staff doesn't want to do it anywhere else. They want to do it here because it's got calculators and plums and the safety warnings, and it keeps them organized. And so when they do them, it automatically bills for them. And in our treatment plan, it does a great job because we integrate back to the software in most cases. But in our EMR, it just blows it out of the water because it's one thing. And so this mischarge capture, I mean, in some hospitals have self-reported that we've made them millions of dollars, plural, in the first year, that they believe is just because we installed our software, which is incredible. And so that's probably the biggest example.
Well, and I think it would inspire the veterinarians at the ground level to maybe even do a little bit more if they felt like they had that safety check.
Yeah. Well, and we all talk about the pay gap for our nursing staff. I mean, this kind of stuff, if you can actually achieve it, that will eventually flow back to the staff. And so it has a more powerful impact than most people think. And by the way, those mischarges, those are, it's money, right? It's dollars, but it's straight to the bottom line, which for a financial person is huge, because you've already paid the overhead on the services, the sub-Q fluids you forgot to give, right? You've already paid for the supplies, you've already paid for the staff. If you actually capture something you weren't, it not only goes back into your pocket, but it goes to the bottom line, which means, if you're looking at valuation of your practice, that extra $1 million is actually whatever the multiple is, 10x in terms of valuation. So it's a huge amount of money when you actually consider what it does for them.
Yeah. So tell me practically, if somebody is like really interested in this, if they're, where are you at? Like, are you putting it in lots of emergency clinics? Are you putting it in some small animal? Is it still in testing? Like, where are you guys at with all this?
Yeah, so we're crazy. We actually launched a third product. So we have 3 products. So let me give you the high level.
Down. Scripts, instant scripts.
Yeah, Scripts is a really exciting. So this is our brand new product this year, which, Instinct Scripts is basically the industry's first true agnostic prescribing platform. And in human health, there is, this is handled, meaning when you need to send medication outside of your hospital walls, you just e-prescribe it to wherever you want. Wegmans, Publix, CVS, Target, all the online pharmacies. So we don't have a great way to do that. Instead, what we have is like 20 different things you got to log into, so nobody does. And then what do? We fax and we call. And so this is actually a free tool that we're starting to offer. It's still in beta. This is a big there's a reason it doesn't exist. It has a lot of regulatory hurdles you need to handle, but it is a really cool tool that we plan to offer, in our other software systems, but also outside for veterinarians. So that's the third one, and that's the newer one. Where we are is our treatment plan is used in hundreds of hospitals, still growing. We're still growing that system. It's used in some of the biggest places in the world, and many of your listeners probably use it. The EMRs are really our future, the full practice management software. We will always offer the treatment plan separate, but the EMR is rolling out every week in specialty our urgent care centers. We do have about 20% GP, and it's a complete system. I mean, it can handle some of the biggest hospitals. I think we're over 50 now fully on it, rolling out this year. And then and we have at least another 50 signed up and waiting to be rolled on. And then we have our scripts product, which is pretty new. So hopefully that gives you like a landscape.
Yeah, it does. So when you're going into a new hospital with the EMR, DMR product, how do you encourage them to change? Like the biggest pushback we get in our hospital is whenever we buy a new piece of equipment or we change something, like the whole staff like pushes back because they have that fear of change. And that's one of my most fascinating things that I like to talk about, because it slows us down so much.
Change management is fascinating to me. So yeah, I mean, change is hard for any human, right? And so then you get a group of people. The best to talk about is like, I actually think it's a bigger change to go from a paper treatment sheet to a digital than switching EMRs. Like,
well, I went through that with my practice. Yeah, that is very difficult to just let go of paper and be like, and feel like everything's going to get in the computer. Yeah.
I mean, it felt like a real slog in the early days getting some of these hospitals, and there are still hospitals, specialty hospitals out there that run on paper. I mean, they don't realize this, but I know several staff who, they have staffing problems like everybody else, but people won't pick up per diem shifts at these places because why would you, right? I mean, I would never work a shift where I had to write a treatment sheet.
You had to write paper.
Yeah, that's like a deal breaker for me. I don't care if it's Instinct or whatever, but I'm not writing paper treatment sheets. Like, this isn't 1995. So it just is crazy to me. But these places have a change management problem, right? And I get it. Change is hard enough, but change in a veterinary clinic is really difficult. And by the way, it's usually for the right reasons. I talk about this concept of, I lecture also on this, change management topic, so I could go on all day, but I'll tell you one, tip I give hospitals, which is cater to your dinosaurs. And cater to your dinosaurs, I developed years ago. Dinosaur does not mean the old people. That's what people think I'm talking about. Nope, because I know people who are young, just out of school, who are just as bad, right? Because they're just, for whatever reason, they're change averse. But I'm talking about the people that if they don't adapt, they are going to die. They're not going to be surviving in this industry or whatever they're doing, right? Because the change is coming, right? And so, but the interesting thing is in the clinics, I always find that the people who are the most change averse, I'll use a stereotype, which is just like, the nurse who's been doing it forever. And he or she tends to be like, if your pet's sick, they're the ones you're bringing your animal to.
They're the good ones, right?
They're the ones you want taking care of your staff, right? Yep, they are your dinosaurs. You can picture them, right? And why do they hate the change? Why are they scared of it? Because they want to take care of your pet. That's their singular mission in life, and they're worried it's going to get in the way. Like, actually try to put yourself in their shoes. And when you cater to them, so one thing I used to do, I've been through several transitions of software in my career that's informed building Instinct, but instead of being holed up at my doctor's office or in the admin, I would do my clinical work right next to them all day, right? Because when they're complaining about something they can't figure out, or something they don't like about the change, you're right there to step in and say, hey, what's going on? Let me show you. Let me talk to you about it. Oh, that's a good idea. That's an interesting problem. And you're right there to catch it before it becomes a culture problem in your hospital, right? Before it's like, oh, well, this person said it doesn't do this, so I've heard it sucks, you know? And so you sort of get ahead of it, and it's one silly little tip, but it really is powerful, and I've seen this work so well. I just wrote an article for we have this blog called Pick the Brain that a lot of people follow, and we just try to share learnings because, you know, Instinct or not, we try to share learnings from hospitals because we work with a lot of really cool hospitals who have a lot of really great ideas. They tend to self-select for being progressive, wonderful centers, and basically we learn a lot from them, and we try to share it. And one of the things I just shared is, you know, sort of this concept that's called self-efficacy, and it's sort of about whether you believe or don't believe that you're going to be able to do something, and how whichever of those you choose ends up being right because of what you chose, right? Which is a really wild thing. And I started
Power of the
reading about it.
brain, right?
Yeah, I have a friend who's in the industry who has a background in philosophy, and you know, I was talking to him about this concept. It has real science behind it. A lot of people get scared to hear this stuff, but he was talking about the power of it in change management, and I started dissecting some of our go lives that go well versus don't, and usually the common denominator is a strong leader who leads with the self-efficacy approach, and I got to go to a go live at a place with one of the best leaders I know in the industry, and seeing her lead the team through a transition to Instinct EMR was illuminating for me because it went so well. And I know why. It's how you frame things to your team, how you lead, and I talk about it in this article. So it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, I love it. It doing this for so many years and being through a lot of change, it's really fascinating. The people that will get right on board and want to try something, and then the people that don't, and how do you get everybody to turn that ship?
Yeah.
So is there anything else that I don't know to ask you about Instinct that you can share, or do you think you have it pretty?
Yeah. I'll just tell you, I mean, as good as our software is and is becoming, we are so excited about the future. We really think it's just starting. But I'll tell you this, the special thing about us is not our software, it's our team. Our team is incredible. And it's what makes Instinct special. We're sort of this really interesting mix of half technology people and half veterinary people, veterinary experts in the industry. We've got CVPMs on the team. We've got 10 veterinarians. We have veterinary nurses, people who are managers in their past life of hospitals. So it's a really incredible team. And as it turns out, support. I mean, when you ask our hospitals what's their favorite thing about our software, even though it's, you know, so they love all the features, it's our team. We have live chat. So, you know, they feel like they're part of the team whenever they have an issue 24 hours a day. And we've got hospitals in, you know, as far away as Hong Kong. So it's like, it's a hard thing to do, but it's a really important part of building what we're building. So I'll just give a shout out to our entire team.
Yeah, and that's the truth in any business, right? Is having the right team and having the right support is what it's all about.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds really interesting. If people want to check it out and they're interested in more, where can they check it out? On your website? How could they
Yeah,
get
I think
if they wanted to?
yeah, our website's probably the best place. Instinct.vet, VET. So pretty easy. And we'd love to give you a demo, show you what we're working on, and talk to you about where we're headed for the future.
Yeah. Do you have like a free demo or something they can sign up for, or do they sign up?
Yeah,
Contact them?
yeah, someone will contact them, and we have a couple different ways they can see, you know, the software depending on what they're looking for. the treatment plan versus the EMR or scripts even. So yeah, we're happy to talk to anybody. We usually prefer to do it live because a lot of people have questions about what we're building, and
Right.
I think that's the best way.
Awesome. Okay, so before we wrap up, can you offer your best advice to either people that want to go into veterinary medicine or that are just getting into it, the new people starting out? What's your advice as somebody that's been through a lot of different aspects and also is an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I get this question a lot from the vet students where I do lectures, and they're my favorite ones to talk to. But I think I'll give two pieces of advice. One is you're the generation that is going to fix the whatever you want to call it, well-being part of veterinary medicine for the practitioners. And
Right.
I always tell people, you get out into practice and people are just, it's a culture of life comes last to a detriment. And it's incredible. But you have to break that. And one of the things that I started doing midway through my career was really protecting, like getting home on time. And a lot of people looked at me sort of sideways in the early parts of my career about that. But the truth of it was I worked really hard to find ways to be efficient. I wasn't on Facebook. I wasn't on, whatever during the day. I got my job done. I did a really good job, I think, on most days. I helped my colleagues and I got out on time. But I wasn't there to, sort of stay because a colleague who's more senior than me isn't as efficient as I am and get out. And that's the way this culture is going to be fixed, honestly. Now, we're practitioners. At the end of the day, you can't leave people high and dry. That's not what I'm talking about. There are plenty of days where you have to be there, especially in the emergency room. But you're the generation that's going to fix this mentality. And then the second thing is, if you are if you have an idea to fix something, or you're coming out of vet school and you have an entrepreneurial mindset, my best advice is become a really high quality clinician first. It's a really hard thing to tell people because a lot of people want to go right out into a business or into industry. I don't think it's a great way to do it because I know too many people. You will never go back to to learn how to be a high quality clinician. That is a fact. I don't care what people tell you. You have to be a really special person to work in industry and then go back and learn how to practice 10 years later. It's not going to happen. But you will always be so thankful that you have an amazing skill. I mean, my clinic days I still cherish because it's wonderful to be reminded of why we're here and being able to go into practice and help animals all day. I know it sounds crazy to most people who work, and I commiserate with it, 4 to 5 shifts a week. But when you get to do what I'm doing eventually, and you've been informed by your practice experience, you'll always have that to fall back on. And that's a really wonderful thing. And it didn't happen by strategy, but I, learned how to be a high quality clinician for the first, 5 to 10 years of my career. And that has served me really well because that's what I focused on.
Yeah, and it's such a unique profession. Like there are not a
Totally.
lot of us. I
No.
love going to a party and people ask you what you are and you say you're a vet and they light up. It just happened to me last weekend. I went to a graduation party and this lady's like, "Oh, let me tell you about my dog that died 6 years ago." Like the whole story of her dog that she hasn't had for 6 years. And there's something uniquely amazing about that, and being the person that gets to heal their heart or listen to their story or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate you, being an advocate for this profession, that we can change it. And that's what you're here to do. That's what I'm here to do. And hopefully, if we get a positive attitude going and love the profession but still go home and enjoy your family, I think that's what it's all about. So that's what I'm excited about. So any last words, anything that we should have said that we didn't?
No, thanks. It's been great.
Been
I hope it
delightful
was
talking
helpful.
to you. It's been amazing meeting you, and I'm really intrigued by this. So I'm going to have to go check it out and see how
Cool.
it might fit. I'm in a general practice, but when it comes to that level, I think all of this sounds great.
Yeah, no, we will. We'll be more focused on the general practice in the future, and people will see that. But it still works really well for it already. So
Yeah.
so yeah, thanks for having me.
So I appreciate you so much. This is Dr. Caleb Frankel, and I'm so excited that you are here today. I thank you so much, and hopefully we'll talk soon
Yeah,
at somewhere, maybe on the podcast again.
that sounds great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a beautiful week, everyone. Bye.